Welcome back to another Fantasy Puck video, guys. Just want to give you guys a quick update. We realized there are trade deadlines coming very fast, whether it's the NHL one or the fantasy hockey trade deadlines. More importantly, Mike and I are aware of this. We will be tackling some trade targets and trade specific content for you guys in the next couple weeks. We just wanted to wait a little bit to ensure a couple things. Number one, we have the most available information on players so we can give you guys the best recommendations, and we don't want to run into anything critical like a major injury happening over the next week, knock on wood, to give you guys players that could just potentially be injured within the next week. So that content will be coming very, very soon next week. But for right now, the show goes on. We have our must adds for week 20. A lot of guys have seemingly had a resurgence over the last little bit. So I will be covering those players in this video. Let's get right into it, guys. And starting us off, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Dylan Cozens. Seemingly had evaporated in the first half of the season. Whether it was some kind of slump or just the fact that last year was an outlier, he is back, guys. 11 points in his last 10 games, line 2 and power play 1. He's centering that second line, which has seen a ton of success lately. His shots per 60 are back up to what we saw at the end of last season as a whole, up to 9.2 shots per 60 currently. Like I said, last season he was at a 9.5. His average time on ice is above 18 minutes, which we love to see over the last 5 games, and he's still only shooting at 8% when his career is hovering around that 10.5, 11 mark. We've seen the Cozens just kind of struggle over the last little bit, but he seems to be back and in full form. He's been fantastic lately. If you're in a 10-team league and this guy's available, I highly recommend picking him up. He's also dual eligible center right wing as well, so very versatile in lineups, especially. We know how scarce that right wing position is. Up next is Jonathan Huberdeau, under 50% owned at 44% currently. He's also kind of back. 8 points in his last 10 games, line 1, power play 1, and the peripherals with Huberdeau have been solid. 18 shots, 10 hits, 5 blocks in his last 10 games. You've seen his shots per 60 kind of get bumped up a little bit as well. He's now up to 6.5 shots per 60 in his last 10 games, and he's averaging over 17 minutes average time on ice. I have that written twice, I apologize, over the last 5 games played. But Huberdeau, we've seen a little bit of a resurgence out of him. He seems to be clicking well with Andrei Kuzmenko, even though recently they've split those two up. But regardless, Huberdeau is just in general playing better, and the thing we love most about Jonathan Huberdeau is the fact that he adds value in those point categories and goals, assists, primarily assists with Huberdeau and power play points, but he'll also chip in the hits as well, and 5 blocks, just an added bonus on top of that, guys. If you're in a league where you need a couple more points, or if you just want to pick up Huberdeau because you think he's kind of turned it around, I personally think it's nice to see him back into not his full form, I'd say, but definitely producing at the rate that he should be. I think he'll be a great ad for you guys in the future and going into fantasy hockey playoffs. Speaking of which, Mason McTavish definitely has a bright future ahead of himself. Only 40% owned currently across Yahoo. He continues to have a breakout season, guys. 38 points in 43 games. He's hovering around a point a game. He's got 10 points in his last 10, line 2 and power play 2. The peripherals have been solid. If you're in a bangers league, this guy is unbelievable as well, just because of how many penalty minutes he is able to rack up. The peripherals, again, have been solid. 16 shots, 14 hits, and 5 blocks in those last 10 games. He's going to continue to see a top 6 role, and even though Anaheim could potentially be selling at the deadline, I think his role is solidified, and he's shown that he is capable of driving a line on his own. Him and Troy Terry have been fantastic together since they put that duo alongside one another, and McTavish has just established himself as a breakout candidate for this year for sure. Highly recommend you guys grab him. Anybody that's around a point a game and chips in the peripheral stats like hits, blocks, and if, like I said, if you're in a bangers leagues and you count PIMs, McTavish is great. Absolutely highly recommend that you add this guy going forward. The Ducks have a pretty solid playoff schedule as well, if I remember correctly also, so you won't get caught with him being on your team and only having to play 2 games in a playoff week, and he's dual eligible on top of that center left wing, so highly moving on to somebody a little bit less owned in terms of ownership percentage, Dylan Strome. He's been fantastic as of late. 13 points in his last 10 games played, line 1 and power play 1. He has pretty much solidified himself as the 1C, playing alongside Ovi, who's I think, on a 10-game point streak now. He's really come back to life. He's on pace for a 60-point season with 31 goals, 181 shots, and then 62 blocks on top of that. He's already got 42 on the year, and he's averaging well over 18 minutes time on ice in his last 10 games. There is nothing not to like about this guy. This guy is going to be 40 to 50% owned within the next 2 weeks, guys. I can almost guarantee it. He's just been so good lately. Highly recommend you grab Strome if you need a center or just anybody in general that you can drop off your team to pick this guy up. I highly recommend you do it. This guy's going to be on a tear. Washington is pushing for that kind of last wild card spot in the East right now, so they're really honed in on trying to perform at a high level, and Strome has been the forefront of that alongside OV. There's nothing not to like about this guy. You should add him on your team absolutely if he's available. Now, last time I recommended adding a goalie similar to what Nico Daws was Harrison of the Philadelphia Flyers. And you have to remember that when I recommend these goalies, there's a couple things. I'll go over it in a second, but just to highlight some of the key points. He started in the last 6 games played for the Devils, with Vanacek now being on IR. He is the clear-cut starter for New Jersey. He's had over a .931 save percentage in 4 of those last 6 starts. I understand he's been pulled in back-to-back games. He hasn't had a good go. He's likely more of a short-term add. Same thing when I talked about Harrison. It's not the fact that I think these guys are going to be elite goalies. If they were elite goalies, they wouldn't be under 25% owned. It's the fact that Nico Daws is going to get you a ton of volume going forward. Is he going to have a couple bad games here and there? Probably. I know New Jersey goalies have not been good at all this year, even remotely, and especially with Daws in the last couple games, but his value is good even if he gives up a couple goals in a game and still gets you the win. The Devils are also chasing that wild card spot. They need to kind of hone it in if they really want a chance at making the playoffs. The reason why I think it's a little bit of a short-term add is I do think New Jersey's going to go out and get a goalie. I don't know exactly when that will happen, but in the meantime, if Nico Daws is available on your team, whether it's just a streaming option, whether it's just you can pick him up and leverage the fact that you know he's starting every single game to get you a couple points here and there, I think he's great value for you guys going forward, especially at 23% owned, and if you need a little bit of goaltending help. But just be aware, it could be a short-term thing, but I think there is value in this ad. At 16% owned, we have Shane Pinto of the Ottawa Senators. He's got 8 points in his last 10 games now. He's now aligned to taking over that spot from Josh Norris, and he's on the power play. I put power play 1-2 here because Ottawa splits their power plays up. 1854 average time on ice his last 5 games is fantastic for a guy like Pinto, and he's got a really high shot volume on top of that. He's 10.2 shots per 60 over the last, since he's returned, essentially. Really low risk, high reward type player to add to your team right now. Should be a top 6 mainstay for the foreseeable future. The Sens have kind of turned it around a little bit. I think it might be a little bit too late, but they have been playing better, and I think that's partially because of the activation of Pinto into the lineup. He, like I said, he's kind of taken off that second line center role from Josh Norris, who has been struggling as of late, and Pinto has really been able to reap the rewards of these top 6 minutes. So if you're in a deeper league, for sure, I definitely recommend adding Pinto if you need a high shot volume guy that's producing as of late. And then finally, guys, we have Brandt Clarke, 9% owned. Now, there is not a lot of defense at this point. You know which defensemen are where until anything happens significantly come trade deadline in the National Hockey League. Nothing is really going to change in terms of the value of defensemen, and that's why they're just so valuable, because they're pretty much solidified at this point. But Clarke has 4 points in his last 5 games since returning. He's pair 3 and power play 2 currently for the Kings. He's got solid shot volume and peripherals, actually 12 shots and 11 blocks in those 5 games, so just around 2.5 shots a game, and he'll get you a block or 2 each game. Doesn't really hit too much, and will likely continue to have a low average time on ice. That's just because he's playing on that third pair right now. He's kind of getting around 14 to 15 minutes a night. I don't really see that changing too much. And I just think with Clarke, there is offensive and power play upside still with him. As you can see, 4 points in 5 games is great. Obviously a small sample size, but there is a reason why this guy was on our radar at the beginning of the year. We thought it could be possible that he could take over power play 1 from Drew Doughty. I don't know how likely that is going forward now, but for a defenseman that's 9% owned, if you are in a deeper league and you want a little bit of more upside when it comes to an offensive defenseman, Clarke, I would highly recommend. He's an incredibly talented player, and I definitely would add him if I had a spot in a deeper league where I felt like, instead of just streaming a defenseman, maybe this turns into something over the next 10 games. He'll get you like 8-9 points, and then at that point, he's going to skyrocket in terms of his ownership. So I think, again, a little bit of a low risk, high reward type play, just given Clarke's talent. And you can see that he's clearly good when it comes to putting up points, and his shot volumes be good enough to, I feel like, where he's actually rosterable. So highly recommend adding Clarke if you need a depth defenseman. That will do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you did. Always appreciate your guys' support as of late. Like I said earlier in the video, we'll have some trade related content coming your guys' way for upcoming fantasy hockey trade deadlines. We understand those are just around the corner, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.